The conference room fell silent as Victoria Chen, CEO of one of the country's most successful tech companies, stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her corner office, staring at the city below without really seeing it. At 38, she had everything society told her she should want: wealth, power, respect, a penthouse apartment, and a calendar so full that her assistant had to schedule her meals. But on this particular morning, as she prepared for another back-to-back day of meetings, she felt something she rarely acknowledged: a profound, aching emptiness that no amount of success could fill. She'd built an empire but lived in it alone, and lately, the silence of her perfectly decorated home had become deafening. Then her phone buzzed with a message that would change everything. The school next to her office building had flooded, and children were being temporarily moved to the community center in her building's ground floor. Victoria dismissed the notification and returned to her emails, having no idea that in just a few hours, a small voice would shatter the carefully constructed walls around her heart. If you believe that sometimes the smallest voices carry the biggest messages, if you believe in the power of unexpected connections and second chances at happiness, please like this video right now, share it with someone who needs hope today, comment your thoughts below, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring stories that matter to people who need them most. Victoria's reputation in the business world was legendary, but not always for warm reasons. She was known as the Ice Queen, brilliant and fair but emotionally distant, someone who made decisions with logic rather than sentiment. Her employees respected her but feared her too, and very few knew the woman behind the title. What they didn't know was that Victoria's coldness wasn't natural but carefully cultivated, a defense mechanism built over years of disappointment and loss. She'd grown up in foster care after her parents died in a car accident when she was 8, bounced between homes where she was fed and clothed but never truly wanted, never truly loved. She'd learned early that emotional attachment was dangerous, that people left, that the only person you could rely on was yourself. So she'd poured everything into her education, then her career, building walls so high that no one could hurt her again. And it had worked perfectly until the walls started feeling less like protection and more like a prison. The morning proceeded as usual with meetings about quarterly projections, product launches, and acquisition strategies. Victoria moved through it all with practiced efficiency, her mind sharp and focused, her emotions locked away where they couldn't interfere with business. It was during a brief break between meetings, as she walked toward the executive elevator, that she heard it, a small, broken sound that shouldn't have meant anything but somehow stopped her in her tracks. Crying. A child crying, not the dramatic tantrum kind but the quiet, hopeless kind that speaks of deeper pain. Victoria told herself to keep walking, that it wasn't her concern, that she had a conference call in 10 minutes. But her feet betrayed her, carrying her toward the sound until she found herself standing in front of the community center doors on the ground floor. Inside, chaos reigned as teachers tried to manage dozens of displaced elementary school children in a space not designed for them. Kids were running around, some playing games, others doing homework, a few watching videos on tablets. But in the corner, almost hidden behind a stack of chairs, sat a little girl who couldn't have been more than 7 years old. She had dark curly hair pulled into 2 lopsided ponytails, big brown eyes swimming with tears, and she was clutching a worn stuffed rabbit like it was the only solid thing in a tilting world. Something about the way she sat, so small, so alone, trying so hard to be invisible, punched through Victoria's defenses like they were made of paper. This child looked exactly how Victoria had felt in every foster home, like she was taking up space she didn't deserve, like she was unwanted and trying not to be a burden. Victoria found herself walking toward the little girl, her expensive heels clicking on the linoleum floor, and when she got close, the child looked up with those enormous, heartbreaking eyes. Before Victoria could say anything, before she could decide if approaching had been a mistake, the little girl whispered something that would haunt and heal her in equal measure. She said, "I don't have a mama. Can I spend a day with you, ma'am?" The words were so simple, so desperate, so full of longing that Victoria felt something crack inside her chest. This child wasn't asking for money or toys or anything material. She was asking for presence, for connection, for someone to choose her, even if just for one day. And Victoria, who hadn't cried in 15 years, felt tears prick at her eyes as she knelt down in her designer suit, not caring about the dirty floor, and asked the little girl her name. Her name was Emma, and she lived with her elderly grandmother because her mother had died giving birth to her and her father had disappeared before she was born. Her grandmother loved her but was sick and tired, and Emma spent most of her time trying not to be too much trouble, trying not to need too much, trying not to take up too much space. She'd seen Victoria walking past the community center earlier, seen this beautiful woman in her powerful suit who looked so confident and in control, and something in Emma's lonely heart had recognized something in Victoria. Maybe it was the way Victoria held herself, like she was strong but separate, powerful but alone. Maybe it was the split second when Victoria's mask had slipped and Emma had seen the same emptiness she felt. Whatever it was, Emma had gathered all her courage to ask the impossible, and now she waited for the rejection she'd learned to expect. But Victoria didn't reject her. Instead, Victoria heard herself saying yes, heard herself telling Emma that she would spend the day with her, heard herself asking one of the teachers for permission, heard herself canceling her afternoon meetings for the first time in her career. The rational part of her brain screamed that this was insane, that she was a CEO with responsibilities, that she knew nothing about children, that this was wildly inappropriate. But there was another part of her, a part she'd buried so deep she'd almost forgotten it existed, that was screaming even louder. This part remembered what it felt like to be a small girl with no mother, to watch other children get picked up from school by parents who loved them, to wonder what was so wrong with you that no one wanted to keep you. This part of Victoria knew exactly what Emma needed because it was what she'd needed too, and no one had ever given it to her. They left the community center hand in hand, Emma's small fingers wrapped around Victoria's, and the trust in that simple gesture nearly undid Victoria completely. She took Emma to her office first, and watching the little girl's eyes widen at the view from the 52nd floor, at the big desk and the leather chairs and the modern art on the walls, Victoria saw her world through new eyes. All the things she'd accumulated, all the symbols of her success, suddenly seemed hollow and meaningless compared to the wonder on this child's face. Emma asked if Victoria was a princess. And Victoria laughed, actually laughed, a sound so rusty and unused that her assistant looked up in shock. Victoria told Emma that she wasn't a princess but a businesswoman, and Emma considered this seriously before declaring that businesswomen were probably better than princesses anyway because they got to make important decisions and help people. They spent the afternoon doing things Victoria had never done before. They went to the park across the street and fed ducks with bread Victoria's assistant rushed out to buy. They got ice cream, and Victoria watched as Emma carefully chose chocolate chip, explaining that it was her grandmother's favorite flavor so eating it made her feel close to her grandmother even when they were apart. They colored with crayons Emma had in her backpack, and Victoria discovered that she'd forgotten the simple pleasure of creating something without worrying if it was perfect or profitable. Emma talked and talked, all the words that had been building up in her lonely heart spilling out. And Victoria listened, really listened, in a way she hadn't listened to anyone in years. Emma told her about her grandmother's garden, about the stray cat she fed secretly, about how she sometimes talked to her mother at night even though she knew her mother couldn't hear her. And with each story, each small revelation, Victoria felt the ice around her heart beginning to thaw. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the park, Emma grew quiet and then looked up at Victoria with an expression so serious and old beyond her years that it broke Victoria's heart. Emma said that she knew this was just for one day, that she knew Victoria was important and busy and probably wouldn't want to see her again, but that she wanted Victoria to know this had been the best day of her whole life. She said that for one day, she'd felt what it might be like to have a mama, someone who chose to be with her, someone who listened when she talked, someone who didn't make her feel like she was a burden. And then, with devastating honesty, Emma thanked Victoria for pretending to want her, even if it was just pretend, because sometimes pretend was better than nothing at all. Victoria felt something break open inside her, all the grief and loneliness and longing she'd suppressed for 3 decades suddenly demanding to be acknowledged. She pulled Emma close and told her something she'd never planned to say, something that surprised her even as the words left her mouth. She told Emma that it wasn't pretend, that this day had been special for her too, that she'd spent so many years building a successful life but had forgotten to build a meaningful one. She told Emma about losing her own parents, about growing up unwanted, about building walls so high that no love could get in but no love could get out either. And she told Emma that sometimes it takes a brave little girl to show a scared grown woman that it's okay to want connection, okay to need people, okay to tear down the walls and risk being hurt because the alternative, living alone behind those walls forever, was so much worse. If this story is touching your heart, if Emma and Victoria's connection is reminding you that we all need love and belonging, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment sharing your thoughts or your own story, and subscribe to our channel. Your engagement means everything and helps us create more content that celebrates the power of human connection. What started as one day became 2, then 3, then a regular arrangement where Victoria would pick Emma up after school twice a week. Victoria met Emma's grandmother, a kind woman worn down by life's hardships but full of love for her granddaughter, and they formed an unlikely friendship. The grandmother confessed that she worried constantly about what would happen to Emma when she was gone. Who would care for this precious child, who would make sure Emma knew she was loved and valuable and deserving of good things. And Victoria, listening to these fears, realized that she'd found something she hadn't even known she was searching for. A purpose beyond profit margins, a reason to come home that had nothing to do with rest and everything to do with joy. The change in Victoria didn't go unnoticed at work. Her employees watched in amazement as the Ice Queen slowly melted, becoming not less competent but more compassionate, not less effective but more understanding. She started mentoring programs at the company, began substantial donations to foster care organizations, implemented family-friendly policies she'd never considered before. But the biggest change was internal, visible only to those who knew her well. Victoria smiled now, real smiles that reached her eyes. She left work at reasonable hours. She talked about Emma constantly, showing pictures on her phone like any proud parent, her face lighting up with genuine happiness that no business success had ever produced. 6 months after that first day, Emma's grandmother passed away peacefully in her sleep. Emma was devastated, and Victoria sat with her through the grief, holding her while she cried, promising her that she wasn't alone, that she would never be alone again. The foster care system began processing Emma's case, and Victoria found herself lying awake at night terrified at the thought of Emma being placed with strangers, of this little girl who'd already lost so much being sent to people who might not understand how special she was. And so Victoria did something that would have seemed impossible a year earlier. She began the process to adopt Emma, to officially become the mother she'd already become in her heart. The legal process was complex and sometimes frustrating, but Victoria navigated it with the same determination she'd brought to building her company. She transformed her penthouse into a real home, adding color and warmth and a bedroom designed specifically for Emma, with bookshelves and art supplies and a window seat where they could read together. She learned to braid hair through countless YouTube videos and patient practice on Emma's ever-patient head. She attended school events and parent-teacher conferences, baked birthday cupcakes that came out slightly lopsided but were made with love, and discovered that the boardroom confidence she'd cultivated translated surprisingly well to dealing with playground politics and homework struggles. If you believe in the power of love to heal, if you believe that family isn't just about blood but about choosing each other every single day, please comment, "Family is love," right now. The adoption was finalized on a sunny morning in spring, and as Victoria signed the papers that made Emma officially hers, she looked at the little girl who'd had the courage to ask a stranger for one day and had somehow given that stranger everything that mattered. Emma wore a new dress for the occasion, her hair in perfect ponytails that Victoria had practiced for hours to get right, and when the judge declared them legally mother and daughter, Emma whispered, "I have a mama now, a real mama," and Victoria whispered back, "And I have a daughter, the daughter of my heart." That evening, they celebrated with Emma's favorite chocolate chip ice cream, sitting on the window seat in Emma's room, watching the city lights come on like stars. Emma asked Victoria if she'd ever imagined this, if she'd ever thought her life would turn out this way, and Victoria answered with complete honesty. She told Emma that she'd spent decades trying to fill the emptiness inside her with achievement and success, that she'd built an entire life around avoiding the very thing she needed most. She'd been so afraid of being unwanted that she'd made herself unavailable to be wanted. But then a brave little girl had asked for one day, and in giving that day, Victoria had received everything she'd been missing. Years later, when people would ask Victoria about her success, about what she was most proud of in her life, she never talked about the companies she'd built or the deals she'd closed or the fortune she'd accumulated. She talked about the day a 7-year-old girl taught her that the strongest walls we build are the ones around our own hearts, and that tearing them down requires the courage to be vulnerable, to need someone, to risk being hurt. She talked about how she'd thought she had everything but had really had nothing until Emma showed her what actually mattered. She talked about learning that sometimes the person asking for help is actually the one offering it, and that the greatest gift we can give another person is not our money or our time but our genuine presence, our willingness to see them and be seen in return. Victoria built a foundation in honor of Emma's grandmother, dedicated to supporting kinship caregivers and ensuring that children in foster care knew they were valuable and deserving of love. Emma grew up confident and compassionate, knowing that she was chosen and cherished, carrying none of the scars Victoria had carried because she'd been saved from them by a mother who understood exactly what she needed. And sometimes, when Victoria tucked Emma into bed at night, she would remember that community center, that small voice asking for one impossible day, and she would whisper a thank you to the universe for sending her the greatest teacher she'd ever had. A lonely little girl who'd had the courage to ask for what she needed and, in doing so, had given Victoria permission to need something too. The truth that Victoria learned and that she spent the rest of her life teaching others was simple but profound. We are all Emma, brave enough to ask for connection even when we fear rejection, and we are all Victoria, walking past opportunities for love because we're too afraid or too busy or too convinced that we're fine on our own. But we're not fine on our own. We need each other, desperately and beautifully, and the moment we're brave enough to admit that need is the moment we become capable of the kind of love that transforms everything. Emma didn't just get a mother that day she asked her impossible question. Victoria got a daughter, yes, but more than that, she got her humanity back. She got permission to be vulnerable, to need, to love without guarantees, to be the person she'd always been meant to be beneath the armor she'd worn for so long. One day was all it took to change two lives forever, and that change rippled outward, touching everyone around them, proving that sometimes the smallest voice asking the simplest question can be the answer to prayers we didn't even know we were praying.